So hey guys, KMCers, welcome back to another true crime video. So today we are going to be talking about Brenda Powell. So let's just jump right into this. So Brenda K. Powell was born on March 19th, 1969. She was 50 years old, from Akron, Ohio. Her parents were Elizabeth Brown and Tom Doyley. She also had a brother named Tom Doyley Jr. She was married to Stephen Powell and had two children, Sydney and Andrew. She was described as she was a devoted person to her job as a child's life specialist at a local hospital for 28 years. She brought energy and caring to families that she was working with. She was a good wife and mother, and she was a beautiful and cherished friend. So now let's talk about the things leading up to the incident as well as the incident itself. This is going to be talking about Sydney. Sydney had a track record of being very good in high school. She played soccer, got good grades. She did end up graduating and attending the University of Mount Union on a scholarship. She went to classes and came home on her holiday breaks or any kind of school break. And while she was away, she was super close with her mom, Brenda, and they texted and talked to each other all the time. And the family was close in general, so they ended up trusting that Sydney would be keeping track of her own college progress, and they didn't really have to worry too much about Sydney. So Mount Union actually offers parents and students an app that keeps track of your schooling, your grades, tuition, stuff like that, and they trusted Sydney, so they never looked at it. Sydney went with her first year doing pretty good, and by her second year she started to struggle a little bit. She kept all of the details about her school performance very quiet. She was truly struggling in all of her classes. And by the end of 2019, Sydney had failed 3 out of her 4 classes and was actually suspended from college. In January of 2020, Sydney returned back to college. The only problem is that she was no longer enrolled and actually had a letter saying that she was expelled. Wanted to act like everything was normal and stuff, so she did lie to her roommate Lauren Curry about her schooling. And in February of 2020, she told Lauren that she was actually going to be moving away for a bit to just kind of figure things out, as she was really needing some time. But in reality, Sydney was actually asked to leave and move out of the dorms. After being asked to leave, she started to pay cash to hotels and stay in hotels for the next few weeks, trying to give the illusion that she was still in college to her parents. And of course, her parents never caught on to the situation. That was until about February 29th of 2020. Brenda ended up texting Sydney, making sure she was keeping her grades up for her scholarship, and Sydney responded as if she was still in school and said that she was doing everything good. Stephen, her dad, actually tried to log into that app to pay some additional tuition that the scholarship wasn't covering, and he tried to log in and he was denied access. So he ended up asking Sydney about it, and Sydney just kind of blew it off and was like, I'll look into seeing what's going on. On March 3rd, Stephen received a call from Mount Union College saying that they needed to speak with him. What they told him was that Sydney was no longer enrolled, and he ended up asking for how long, and all they said was that he needed to talk to her. He wanted to confront her about it, so he ended up looking at the Life 360 app, which tracks people, and found that Sydney was actually at their house. Because of this, he left his phone at his job and went home to confront Sydney about it. He showed up at his home about 11:30 a.m. He found Sydney was alone, and he ended up talking to her about what was going on. Stephen understood and said that they would talk about her finishing the semester, and also told Sydney that they needed to tell Brenda about what was going on. So they did call Brenda while she was at work. Brenda had decided after they talked that she wanted to come home to talk to Sydney and figure out what was going on. And while Brenda was coming home, Stephen decided to go back to work. So for about an hour after Stephen went back to work and Brenda came home, they were texting back and forth. And at 12:41, Stephen would send his final text. Brenda did call Mount Union College to kind of see what was going on, to leave a message. So she did leave a message. Shortly after that, Mount Union College ended up calling her back, and Brenda picked up the phone at about 12:35 p.m. and answered the call. On the other end of that call was the Mount Union dean and the administrator that ended up saying that they heard a loud thud as well as a scream, followed by multiple different thud sounds after. And then all of a sudden the call was dropped. They tried to call back, but they got no answer. And by the time they got the third phone call, someone did pick up the phone at 12:40 p.m. And they heard the voice was Sydney's voice. They ended up calling the police to the home for a welfare check. Now let's talk about the investigation. Police found Brenda with life-threatening injuries, so they did send her to the hospital where she does later die. Sydney tried to cover it up by breaking a window to stage it to look like a break-in happened. She ended up telling the police that a break-in happened and that her mother told her to run. Police found blood outside the door, right next to the window, indicating that the murder had to have taken place before the break-in. And at 12:51, Stephen was contacted about the situation that happened with Brenda and Sydney, and he ended up calling the home when Sydney answered and told him about the break-in story. And she actually did go to the hospital to get checked out. The police were doing a search of the house, and they had found a cast iron skillet in the master bedroom floor, as well as a bloody steak knife. Brenda was laid to rest on March 9th of 2020, and shortly after that, Sydney was arrested for the murder. She made bond of $250,000. An autopsy did show that multiple blunt force trauma occurred to Brenda, indicating that Sydney had to have hit Brenda over the head multiple times, stabbed her in the neck over and over again for at least 23 times. So now let's talk about the trial. So Michelle Gaffney, the college administrator, testified that Sydney received a letter of expulsion, and it's a certified letter which requires a signature. So she definitely had to have signed for it to receive it. She also testified that because Sydney wouldn't have been a student, she would not be allowed to move back into the dorms. She also testified that she spoke with Sydney about moving out of the dorm, and Sydney did confirm to her that she did get the letter of suspension. Gaffney also asked if she could call Sydney's parents, and Sydney got very super defensive and told her that she already talked to them. Stephen also testified in court about the events leading up to the death of Brenda, and defense tries to testify that Sydney was suffering a psychosis on the day of the killings. They said that she suffers from schizophrenia and she was having delusions and hearing voices and lost control. Prosecutors disagreed with that completely, as they said that she had it well planned out, and she seemed to be perfectly capable on the day that it occurred. On September 20th of 2023, Sydney was found guilty on all counts of purposeful murder, felony murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. And on September 28th of 2023, she was sentenced to 15 to life in prison with possibility of parole. and she does plan to appeal this sentencing. The aftermath of Brenda's death is that they did have a GoFundMe set up to help with funeral costs. I believe it's still active, so I will have it linked down below. But I'm just going to leave you guys with some photos of Brenda and her life. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment down below what case I should do next, and subscribe if you haven't already. And turn on the bell notifications so you're notified when we post every Tuesday and occasionally Fridays. This is KMC Whatever, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.